All right, welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America. With me, as always, Jack Fairchilds. Jack, thank you for being here.
Always, Chris. Thank you for having me.
And I have to let you know this is, again, part of the new Midnight Ride Network. And we're very pleased and honored to be a part of that because this is going to be, I think, the next big thing in conservative circles because it's not simply about picking sides party-wise. It's about having a maintained, consistent philosophy. And we will address the issues of the day with that consistent philosophy. Not something we created, but historically speaking, conservative thought dating back all the way to Jefferson, through Reagan and Goldwater, even up until today, what it means, what it does not mean, and how we can solve modern problems with addressing it through conservative philosophy. Now, with that said, last episode we talked about what it means to be a conservative. We talked about the Republican Party and how oftentimes it's fallen away from those conservative roots. This show is going to be a little different. And believe me, there are so many things I wanted to talk about today, including that great basketball game this past week that we saw involving Caitlin Clark and Reese from LSU. We may talk about that later, but first let's talk about something I think is really important for what we're trying to do and understand in today's modern world. And it comes down to this, Jack. How are we being controlled? How are we being controlled? I started thinking about it just driving around, and one way naturally is through authoritarian impulses, but there are other ways. I don't want to get to that because it really, and this is where I'm going to bore you to death and probably everybody else listening, so bear with me and I'll bring this thing full circle if you'll just work with me. There have been a couple of novels throughout the years many of you have heard of. Animal Farm, right? George Orwell. Everyone's heard of that. In fact, we all had to read it either in high school or in college. Not a bad piece of work.
No.
There was another novel, wasn't quite as big as far as students, but it dealt with the same dystopian themes in a slightly different manner, and that was Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World. Again, don't turn the TV yet. You're going to like this when I get there. So keep in mind, a dystopian fiction deals with things in a futuristic concept, and it does so because it's trying to impart lessons presently of what could be occurring and maybe how to avoid the problems occurring in the future. And so we've seen these novels unfold, and these novels unfolded at roughly the same time. Huxley's in the 20s, I think is when he wrote it, Orwell's in the 40s, but they're seeing a lot happen in the world when they wrote these novels. Remember the Soviet Revolution in the first part of the 1900s? Huxley watched that, and he recognized it for what it was. The same thing happened with Orwell. They watched these revolutions, watched these movements, watched the rise of totalitarianism, right, throughout Europe and Eastern Europe, and it dawned on them that there could be problems in the future, but they handled it slightly differently. If you remember Orwell talked about themes like control and surveillance. And we've all seen the story about the revolution that takes place on the farm, and there's they overthrow the means of production, the farmer loses, and then as they rise in power, they show the same controlling impulses the farmers showed. It's basically a novel of how human nature behaves when it confronts power. And so we know that's one way we can be controlled. Orwell was watching all of this unfold, and he saw totalitarian impulses, particularly with Stalin, and it scared him. People don't realize Orwell was a democratic socialist. You believe that?
Wow. I mean, I don't know that I realized that.
Well, now, bear in mind, most democratic socialists today embrace totalitarianism. They embrace the power of the state. He was afraid of it with good reason. He had seen what happens when these bad people get control of government. So he writes in a way to warn us, and he warns us about the surveillance state. He warns us about control and power. And so we always study that, and we say, wait a minute, that's how we'll be controlled. There'll be a big government that controls us. And there's some truth in that. But there's a second way. And this is the way I think we're presently being controlled. And it's the one thing we seem to miss as conservatives because we're so focused on keeping government off of our backs. We have forgotten that the second way is just as controlling and compelling as the first. And that's Huxley's way of control. A brave new world. His concern was technology. His concern was the fact that humans had abandoned all the old social constructs, the old institutions, even public gatherings in exchange for pleasure. In other words, they were willing to do away with the old in exchange for the new. And they were constructing humans effectively in this brave new world, and they were designed to be perfect. They were designed to be a part of a class system. There were alphas, there were betas, there were deltas. And as you became part of that class, you worked happily happily because you knew your place and you weren't allowed to exercise rights outside of your place. How did they control the population? Well, they gave them drugs, made them happy, but more importantly, they chased pleasure. Technology began to control people, not the other way around. Does that sound familiar?
Very familiar.
All right, consider. If you get caught up in a system where all you're doing is chasing pleasure, you become distracted. Think about the internet. I have lost so many hours at work.
Oh, yeah.
On the internet. It's not just the internet. Sports. We have families that will travel halfway across the globe to watch a football game, but won't take their kids 10 minutes away to get tutoring. We're so distracted. We're chasing technology. We're chasing pleasure. We're chasing everything but the real issues affecting our lives. We're being controlled. And we think we're in control. And that's the worst part. We're literally being manipulated by technology. Those swipes you make on Tinder, you're being manipulated. Those swipes you make up and down on TikTok, you're being manipulated. I'm not saying technology is bad. Huxley probably would have said it's terrible because he was concerned about its effort to control people. And some might argue that Huxley was attacking capitalism itself. I don't believe that necessarily. I'll get to that later. What I do know is this. We're not paying attention.
We're not. That's 100% accurate.
And the price of liberty, to maintain liberty, is eternal vigilance. But we're not being vigilant. And so what occurs is a population falls into this slumber where the ruling class gets to do whatever they want, and we simply can't control it because we don't care. We're busy. We're chasing pleasure. What does that sound like? I think we're there. Now, the worst part about it is if Huxley's scenario is unfolding here, how much easier will it be for Orwell's to eventually unfold even more aggressively? If they can control us by keeping us distracted, government will continue to grow. Rights will continue to be left or abridged. Individual liberties lost. What's the end result? You see, these two systems now, these two philosophies seem to be working in conjunction to keep us in a really bad spot. With that said, dystopian nature of the American experiment could be right around the corner, or perhaps it's already here. Why do you suppose we keep losing elections? We're distracted. Why do you suppose we keep electing the same rhinos every year?
Distracted.
We're distracted. Why do you think the government keeps growing despite all the promises that it won't grow? We're distracted. Maybe it is Huxleyan. Maybe that's where we are now. And I think that scares me as much as Orwellian. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're 100% accurate. I mean, as you were sitting there talking about the distraction and talking about the technology, you know, it brings me to the point that here I am showing up today with both my iPad and my phone, just two convenient pieces of technology that we have. But a lot of times, this iPad right here, it's not necessarily utilized to research things. It's probably more like, to your point that you were talking about before, it's more utilized to watch sports or watch other entertainment.
And it's not just that. It's bread and circus, right? How do you control the Romans when they're looking for a revolution? You give them bread. You give them circuses. The Colosseum, man. Anything to distract. We've seen this before. Those congressional hearings in Washington, D.C., that's the circus, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, think about this. I don't even watch them anymore because we know for a fact that Congress can't seem to do anything. They're completely dysfunctional. But what they can do is hold hearings and try those gotcha moments, right?
Well, that's all it is.
That's all it is. And so, but we're watching. When we do pay attention, that's what we're watching. And we're distracted because it's so cool. It's a circus, right? And they take care of our needs. But it's not just the technology. I mean, think about this, man. We chase anything for pleasure now. We eat too much. We drink too much. I mean, if you're looking at the rates right now of alcoholism and drinking in this country, it's skyrocketing right now.
It's very, very high.
It's skyrocketing. There seems to be this overall misery that people are suffering from. And it may be because we have become detached, right? Yeah. There's a purpose as individuals, but we don't seem to be pursuing that purpose. Now, here's the thing. This is where it gets really scary. You say, what's the big deal? Whether it's Huxleyan or whether it's Orwellian, here's the big deal. Conservatism depends on our ability to conserve what we talked about last week, the American experiment, liberty, individual dignity, and control of government growth. We have to conserve those things if we are to survive as a country. Yet here we are, losing. Why does it matter? Here's why. Our defense mechanisms are failing because we're not paying attention, and they're failing at the wrong time in history. The American left never stops. You may hate them. You may disagree with them. They are persistent. It never stops. The entire philosophy of liberalism is predicated on change. Sometimes they don't even know what the change is. They just want change for change's sake. And it's almost religious. Have you noticed that?
100%.
It's very fervent. These are true believers. When they come out of college, these kids are ready to change the world. They're not sure why. They're not sure how. They just want to see breathtaking and constant change. Well, if we're not paying attention, it's change that will come one way or the other. It happens temporarily, periodically. It happens monetarily, and it happens incrementally, right? Incrementally means that it happens over 1,000 cuts, not all at once. And we've seen the left operate this way for a long, long time. They never stop. They're relentless. Here's the other thing about the American left. Even when they achieve a goal, they then repackage the argument and attempt another change. It's like they can't be satisfied with victory, right? So if we're watching these people fight like they're fighting, and they are effective fighters in their own respects, and we're not paying attention, the field of battle is theirs. The country will become theirs. And that's why it's so important to pay attention. Vigilance is the only defense we have against this constant change. Now, here's some examples. Remember, it's a never-ending liberal change of whatever. Institutions, social norms, whatever the case may be, it's always about change, change, change. Think about this. And this is part of the show that's probably going to be provoking. It's probably going to get Jack in trouble for this thing all the time. That gets him in trouble.
It's going to happen. I guarantee it.
Consider this. The American experiment obviously has its imperfect moments. That's why we search for a more perfect union. Any institution of government is going to be challenged by the insecurities and the imperfections of mankind. We don't suggest there be perfect government. We don't believe the government can be perfect because individuals seemingly can't be perfect. So the mistakes we've made, we try to learn from. But the things we've done well, which created the greatest economy in the history of the world, the things we've done well, which created the great powerhouse militarily that we have, we should preserve those institutions. It makes sense. Conservatives look at those institutions and ask why they're here. And if they've been here for a while, they put the burden of proof on the left to change them. If we're not defending the institutions, they're watered down and we eventually lose. Think about race. This is the part that's going to get us all in trouble, but we have to have provocative discussions about this because nobody seems to want to talk about it anymore. There's a one-sided argument that no one wants to defend against race. If you're a politician in the 1950s or 40s or 30s and you say, sincerely, as you should have said then, that every human deserves dignity, every human deserves equal protection under the law, every person matters, right?
Yes.
Okay. That color should not be a defining characteristic. It's a trait. It's immutable, but it shouldn't control the way we perceive the world. Not if we really focus on individuals as opposed to collectives. Conservatives are supposed to reject collectivism. Race is a collective. Gender is a collective. We look at each person as we're supposed to as individuals and love them no matter what their imperfections may be because we understand our own imperfections as well. We're not here to judge the world. We recognize we're imperfect. And some of our greatest philosophers said we're not to be the correctors of mankind, but maybe just examples from time to time. That was Russell Kirk, right? So we're watching this unfold, and I say in 1935 or 1940 that everybody deserves dignity, that everybody should have the right to vote, that everybody should have the same rights. That would have made me a preeminent civil rights icon.
It would have, absolutely.
Okay? If I say it today, what does it make me? Here's the thing. The battles were won, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And they just redefined what it meant to be racist and applied it in a new theory. And that's called systemic racism. Consider, there's no real evidence of a system, particularly governmental, where it's racist. It doesn't exist. It's a fiction created by academia. And right now we are running with it like it's the truth. But there's no identifiable evidence of its existence. In fact, all the evidence seems to indicate that it does not exist. So if I say that, and if I argue that everyone should be equal, and if I say that everyone should be treated the same, and if I say that equal protection should apply to every American, now that makes me, by definition, a racist.
It does.
See how far they've twisted it?
Absolutely.
Because change, from their perspective, never, ever stops. What they're seeking now is a change in the system, and they're using those ideas to get a hold of the system. Let me explain. Marxism writ large is really simple. Class struggle. Class struggle. There has to be division. Division, not unity. They create division, and it's a form of populism. I'm really tired of CNN talking about Trump being a populist. That's all they are, a populist. Mm-hmm. Every issue is defined as a disagreement and division, and then they say it's us versus them. That's populism.
Yep.
They create an elite class, and they attack that class, and if we dare defend it, we're the bad people. That's populism. That's what they've been doing. But they're so good about using those terms to attack us while embracing it for themselves and ignoring the devil in the room, right? So here we are, all this time later, fighting the best we can to preserve the American experiment. What are they really saying when they say systemic racism? They're saying division. There has to be changes. What they really mean is capitalism has to be changed. Mm-hmm. Whether there's systemic inequalities in wealth, blah, 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 one thing leads to the other, we must change the system. Where does it end? Where does it end? At what point do you tear down every single thing, economically speaking, that made this country strong at the expense of a theory that can't be proven, which is where we are right now? You don't believe me. Let's back up and look at it. Systemic racism. Systemic means relating to or of a system. That's what it means, relating to or of a system. Your central government, your federal government, has dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of regulations and laws that specifically prohibit racism. Dozens and dozens of laws and regulations that specifically favor one person over the other based on the immutable characteristic of race. It gives preferences. That's unequal by definition. And yet if we stand up and say that's wrong, that we shouldn't see each other as collectives, we're the problem, you see. And that's really the issue right now. It's not that they think we are, they know it's an effective tool to hammer us into the ground. It's an effective tool to effectuate change. They want the system challenged, and they'll never stop. So we have an option. We can ignore it and pretend it's not there, Huxleyan. Chase the pleasure and chase the distractions and pretend it's not there and not talk about it as they just run over the top of our institutions. Think about this. Systemic racism. Now, I may have slept through his presidency, but Barack Obama was African-American, wasn't he?
I believe he was.
And his attorney generals were African-American, weren't they?
I believe they were.
So the two top law enforcement officers in the country over the federal government were African-American, right?
That is correct.
Well, why didn't they fix systemic racism then?
That's a great question.
Why didn't they correct it? It's because it doesn't exist. It's a fiction. Now, drill down. Think of all the laws and regulations and norms that have occurred over the years, and I'm happy to see equality. I hope we always judge each other as individuals. There's no justice at all in judging somebody collectively. The government should never allocate resources based on race. So I say those things, and I think liberals agree. Maybe they don't. Maybe they want something more. What do you think? When will they be happy with this whole system?
They're never going to be happy because one of the things that they continue to have to come up with is a victim class. And that's what they are really good at, is creating another victim class. That's what this boils down to. They want to convince people that they cannot achieve on their own, that it's something that is oppressing them, holding them back, because that's how they maintain their power. That's how they convince folks to vote for them or whatever the case, because you need them to achieve something.
Bear in mind, I'm only using this as an example. Mm-hmm. Don't think we're going to talk about this indefinitely for the rest of our lives. This is one example of the way the left has acquired victory, redefined what it means to have victory, and then use our joining them in the position as to basically argue we're not good enough, right? Yeah. You say, where does this come from, Chris? What really motivated you? Well, I tell you what happened. We just celebrated Easter, just a short while ago, and I was having a great Easter Sunday. Everything was fine, and all of a sudden, I made the tragic mistake of clicking on CNN.
I know where you're going now.
Oh, my gosh. CNN. Now, remember, my argument is that they'll never be satisfied.
That is correct.
My argument is they always want division to separate us.
That is correct.
It's the Marxist concept of class struggle. So this is not just class struggle. It's literally race struggle, every other struggle they can imagine. And you can't make this up. I'm going to show you because I don't believe the listeners. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I almost wrecked my car. Yes, I was reading when I was driving.
You're not supposed to do that.
So the headline says, was Jesus a man of color? Why this question matters more than ever. I've been considered, as old as I am, as much as I've seen, as much as I've done, I've never considered that.
It doesn't matter.
It always struck me that he was Jewish, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're trying to redefine it now. And the article dives into my earlier theory. It can't leave well enough alone. Mm-hmm. It wants to define him as a man of color. Why? We should ask ourselves that question. Why? I mean, he is, without exception, the greatest historical figure that's ever existed. And I've never once in my life heard a debate as to whether or not he was non-Jewish. I think we would all acknowledge that he's Jewish. Did I miss something?
I think you did. I think you missed, once again, as you said, they have to redefine everything. They have to make certain changes because, again, you can't hold on to any norm as it is, because part of their way of breaking down the old structure is by proving that what we once thought was 100% incorrect.
Well, frankly, I really can't figure out the American left. On one hand, they're openly hostile to Christianity.
That's fair.
And on the other hand, they seem to be embracing it. I'm not sure. Where are they in this argument?
I don't think they're embracing it. I think as much as they want to try to point out something to try to poke holes wherever they can. So I think they'll embrace it if they think it can aid them, but they're never truly embracing it, if that makes sense.
Well, then they go through all of this article, and I would encourage you to read it, but your brain may explode.
It will.
And I don't think anybody disputes that he is a Middle Eastern man. I thought that was taught from day one. And they talk about these concepts of a white Jesus. I've never seen that Jesus. Did I miss him? And I know there's pictures of him out there, particularly in the Scandinavian countries and over in Europe. Whatever. I didn't see that. I mean, I'm down here in the south of Mississippi. We always had a Jewish Jesus, and I thought that was perfectly acceptable. Yeah. And I think almost every Christian does. But there are more important points here I want to make about this, because in the process of trying to redefine a person's character through race, I think that's probably the very definition of racism, isn't it?
It very much is.
And then you go back and you think about, why would you ever make these comments and take away the significance of this individual's life? Nobody cares what his color is. We care about what his message was. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody can dispute it's the greatest message of peace and prosperity and love that anybody has ever shared. Shouldn't that be celebrated notwithstanding his color? Why does CNN think that's important? Why do they think it's important that he's a person of color? I don't know anybody who ever has.
I don't either. I think that this is one of those things they're just trying to, I think what they're hoping, Chris, and I think that this is probably what you believe too, is that they're trying to figure out some way to create a division.
You hit the nail on the head. I was about to say it. Remember, Marxism needs divisions.
Yep.
This is a division over universal values. The emphasis on race, but not his teachings. Mm-hmm. And it seems to distract. There it is, a word again. It seems to distract from his teachings. It's very odd.
It all ties together.
It all ties together. And that was the point of all of this. And I've been on this diatribe for 35 or 40 minutes, and the only thing I'm going to get out of it is criticism. But for goodness sakes, tell me one thing we've said that even remotely could be considered objectionable by asking and raising these questions. Meanwhile, CNN gets a pass.
Well, you're not supposed to ask those questions. CNN, it's okay for, because again, the double standard here. So
one of the great lessons he taught was equality.
Mm-hmm.
One of the great lessons he taught was equality, salvation for all, Jew, Gentile, right? Yeah. And yet here we are once again politicizing for distraction purposes and for division purposes. And I don't know how the American left can take this seriously. Of course, there's all kinds of quotes in here about how wonderful it is. I just don't. Who wakes up in the morning and has these thoughts?
Somebody that, again, is just trying to figure out any way that they can divide and create that division, and furthermore, try to create or empower what they have already created as a victim class. That's what they're trying to do here. They're hoping to play on the worst aspects of humanity, and that's why they want to try to define this the way that they can, because they're hoping, again, as you pointed out, to take away from Jesus's message and pull you into this nonsense.
Maybe it boils down to this, and this is the great problem we're having addressing the issues of the day. Mm-hmm. If we as conservatives value individuality and dignity of each human, and we truly believe that, which I do, and I think you do as well.
Absolutely.
Why do they force us into a collectivist mindset every single discussion. It's always us versus them. It's black versus white. It's male versus female. It's gay versus straight. All they've got is division. That's not helpful to this country. It's harmful to our progress. It's harmful to our unity. And they claim they want to live in a democracy. Give me a break. First of all, it's not a democracy. It's a
Republic.
But we do have democratic principles that underlie the republic. But I'm not sure they believe in that. While I'm on that, and I'm going to transition off of this, we have to do our sponsor here in a second. Have you ever considered the great, oddity of liberal thought? When the Supreme Court of the United States, when they were literally for 70 years giving the American left everything they wanted, the left never said a word about democracy. Mm-hmm. And yet I never elected a judge, do you? Or justices elected or not? They're the most anti-democratic institution we've got. So the American left, not for 70 years while the government grew and all these decisions came down, not for a moment did they challenge concepts of democracy. The American left doesn't want democracy. They want their way. They don't want democracy. They want to control. And isn't it funny that the Supreme Court finally has basically reverted back to its original purpose, mm-hmm. which is to try to actually interpret the laws as they're written as opposed to create laws out of thin air. And now all of a sudden, it's anti-democratic. It's never been about democracy. It's about control. The sooner we realize that, the better off we'll all be. Jack, I understand you've got something you want to point out.
Yeah, Chris, it's, again, when you think about these things, it definitely, it's eye-opening as you look at everything that goes on with the left and how they're trying to distort everything. But one of the things, too, at night, Chris, we need to figure out a way to get a good night's sleep as we transition into our sponsor here. My Pillow, of course, is a gracious sponsor of ours. Chris, have you tried your pillow out yet?
I have. It's wonderful.
It's a great pillow. I'm enjoying it so far. And for all of our listeners out there that want to try to check out My Pillow yourself or any of the great products there at My Pillow, you can go to mypillow.com/midnightride and you can get up to 80% off on select products there on the website. Or you can just go to mypillow.com and type in the promo code Midnight Ride. That's one word. Right there, Midnight Ride.
So you're telling me I can go to the website and I can type that simple code in and get 80% off?
Up to 80% off. Let's be clear.
Up to. Okay. Well, up to. First of all, we're nothing but grateful to Mr. Lindell.
Absolutely.
For his sponsorship of this show, and likewise, we would formally request that I'd like to have 3 more pillows, please.
3 more, and please. They sell coffee too, so I'd like to try out that coffee.
Well, why is he holding out on us?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we got 1 pillow each.
We're doing all this hard work for him, and I've got 1 pillow. Somebody's renegotiate this contract.
And you remember the feels they can form. So remember that.
Can we renegotiate this contract? No, he's not. He's like, cut it off. You're barely hanging on by a thread as it is. He's about to cut the sponsorship as we speak, especially all that race talk. You're out of here, bud. Oh, for the love of Pete. I want to get here in a second to our rhino of the day.
All right.
It's John McCain's girlfriend.
I know who you're talking about well.
Lindsey Graham.
Gramnesty.
I'm going to get to that in a second. But I mean, I'm so tempted to keep going down this track. By the way, I saw some comments this past week. I don't know if I guess it's been a few days now, mm-hmm. but did you get a chance to watch Iowa, the women's team, play LSU?
I did watch that game last night.
It wasn't last night. This is Friday. It was some time ago.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't last night, was it? You must have watched a replay last night.
I might have watched the replay. That is correct.
All right, well, here's the thing about that game. And again, we're transitioning. We'll get back to Gramnesty in a second. I thought that was one of the best performances I've ever seen any basketball player perform in my life.
It was incredible.
The Caitlin Clark's her name, mm-hmm. from Iowa. And I kept waiting for her to fail because the pressure was immense.
Yeah.
And I kept waiting for her not to knock these baskets down. But every time she needed to, she did. I'd never seen anything like it. I really believe we're watching something generational with her. And it's a shame that everybody is so divisive. And yet, and this is important to recognize, these women are achieving incredible things with their basketball ability. They're incredibly talented. And when you become incredibly talented, you become incredibly popular. And when you become incredibly popular, you become incredibly criticized.
Yeah.
I've never heard a complaint about that.
No, I haven't either.
Now, what's going on with Angel Reese?
Oh, if you watched her post-game press conference, then she's just victimized. I mean, it was all a victim excuse after excuse. And I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and we both agreed that she created her persona herself. She embraced, in many ways, what is a heel persona, if you're familiar with professional wrestling. She embraced that type of persona for herself.
I can't speak to everything she was complaining about. Here's what I do know is that no matter what the profession is, and I know these women aren't in professions yet, although NIL kind of makes it seem like a profession. Whatever profession you are, as soon as you elevate in the public side, you're going to face significant criticism.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've been called everything but a Baptist in my life.
That's fair.
It is still ongoing. It's never going to stop. But that's okay. I have a couple of options. I can either take it and be tough, or I can withdraw.
Yeah.
And I don't want to withdraw. I don't think Angel Reese wants to withdraw.
No, I don't either.
So my question is, recognizing that you are a person of importance and recognizing that you are a person that's rising in popularity, you need to also recognize that thick skin and strong skin is important.
Yes.
She's such a talented basketball player. But when you watch her play, there's a lot of complaining. And even last night, whenever it was a week ago, whenever this came in, there was a lot of complaining. I wish she would elevate above that because there are so many girls that look up to her. And just recognize that, yes, you're gonna have to face some tough criticism as you rise in success and popularity. And I think she's just getting started. Both of these ladies are just getting started. The one thing that I thought was interesting is it a generational thing? The only problem I've ever had with Angel Reese is that there was been a couple of games where she's very outspoken after the victory is secure. Now, I played a lot of sports in my life. Trash talk's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just part of the game. And that's another time. You got to suck it up. If you're going to be on that court and you're going to hear it, you can give it back, but you got to be tough enough to do that. My problem with her is the time she reacted after the game. Because once you beat somebody, I was always taught to try to win with dignity, right?
Shake their hand.
Well, just be kind. I remember that one game. I guess it was the same girl she played against last year. She went over in front of everybody and pointed to the ring. But, you know, I wouldn't care if it was Conor McGregor or anybody. Once you win,
act like you've won before.
But then she begins to complain while people are mad at her. Well, again, you're elevated, you're successful, you're popular, and then you do things like that. You're inviting criticism.
That's creating that heel persona.
It is. And, of course, I saw an article that argued that it was misogynistic and racism. No, it's not. It's just you're a very popular person. You play for LSU. Guess what? The entire SEC hates LSU. By that definition alone, you're going to find a lot of enemies right away, right?
Exactly.
I've never minded them. I went to Ole Miss, but I never minded LSU. But I know a lot of people that despise LSU.
I do too.
I just don't get it. I mean, I'm so tired of everything that occurs in this world coming back to misogyny and alleged racism.
Well, it's ridiculous too. And you bring up the two of them, and it's interesting because, again, you see certain things that they'll criticize Caitlin Clark for, that Angel Reese will do the exact same thing, and there's a pass. And again, there has to be a racial component there because why does one get a pass where the other? Just not long ago, Chris, I found, and this was during this whole period where Caitlin Clark was getting ready to break the NCAA record. And I think it was Cheryl Swoops, former WNBA player, former collegiate player, great women's basketball player. She made some statements. And then afterwards, she said, well, I'm not racist. I can't be racist because I'm black. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, that is ridiculous because it doesn't matter your race. You can be racist no matter what.
That comes from a theory, once again, a theory publicized almost exclusively in higher academia. When I say higher, I don't mean better. I just mean they consider themselves higher. That elite class, you know, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And the theory is that if you're a minority and you have no power, by definition, you can't be racist. It's a strange theory. Does that mean that one day, if Asians, for example, which they are a minority, can they not be? It's a weird concept. I prefer to judge folks as individuals. And if you have hate in your heart because of somebody else's skin, then you're a racist. You shouldn't
Yes.
do that. You ought to have the ability to ask for forgiveness and move forward and be kind to everybody.
Yes.
But we do see this double standard, and that's another thing I'm concerned about is what happens if we teach these kids this double standard is acceptable. Whatever happens to being fair. Anyway, being fair, we're getting close to the end here, and I want to be fair to Lindsey Graham. I'm just not sure I can. I'm not sure I can. This is the episode, a part of the episode we call Chris McDaniel's Rhino Hunter. And I don't know what the future of this looks like, but I sense that's going to be interesting.
I'm ready for it. I'm here for it.
I think soon enough there's going to have to be some music.
I think so.
I think some camouflage perhaps.
Costumes are in order.
Maybe a shooting range or something.
A shooting range.
Clearly there has to be a mask. And I'm going to suggest that you, sir, wear the rhino mask.
I will wear the rhino mask as long as I can keep the headphones on. And
if we're really good about this, because this is, we need ratings.
Yes.
I think we go outside at some point and I get an airsoft rifle. And I do my best to take you out as you cross the street.
No, pass on that one. I think we that's when we need to find an intern.
Well, we can do that. There's got to be somebody here that can help. So today's rhino of the day is none other than Lindsey Graham. Now look, folks, you've seen Lindsey Graham. He's the guy that appears. I'm not saying this is a matter of assertion. I'm not trying to get a libel suit. He just appears to have a whole bunch of sugar in his tank. Is that a correct assessment?
I think the appearance is there.
And I don't mean that he's homosexual. No. It's not what I'm implying. I just mean that he seems very fluid. And I don't mean sexually. That's a terrible word to use. I'm talking about just the way he handles any issue. The first thing I don't like a lot about him is he will change his mind in a heartbeat if it's politically expedient. He'll be pro-Trump. He'll be anti-Trump. He'll be pro-Trump again, then he'll be anti-Trump. Mm-hmm. The only real talent the man has displayed over his entire career is butt kissing.
Yeah.
He's exceptional at it.
He's a chameleon almost to how he can jump from point to point at every issue. He's been on every side of every issue.
Every side of every issue, including Republican versus Democrat, which is why he is the Rhino. Now, you should know by now that Rhino is an acronym for Republican in name only, right?
Yes.
I hope our audience knows that. And he represents that because he has jumped back and forth. Doesn't seem to be a consistent theme in the things that he believes in. And we've seen this with McConnell. But McConnell would have the excuse that he's the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate, so he has to do this. Mm-hmm. Graham is supposed to be, a guy from South Carolina that can actually be conservative. The other senator there is relatively conservative, is he not?
He is.
Okay. Again, we have this
weird.
bifurcated South Carolina thing. They're pulling the Kentucky thing. Right? We have one relatively conservative senator, and then the other is just whatever that needs to be on that particular day. So let's talk about this. Lindsey Graham, more evidence that he is the rhino of the day. Supreme Court nominations. The United States Supreme Court has been the battleground for our movement for a long, long time. And you say, why is that? Is that anti-democratic? Well, it became the battleground because of so many bad Supreme Court decisions, right? And all of which were rooted in a philosophy that is designed to give justices more power than the people have. If you interpret a law or the Constitution and you add words to it, by definition, you're rewriting the law or the Constitution. And you're doing it as an unelected, right, lawyer. That's a problem. I don't want unelected people rewriting constitutions or unelected people rewriting laws. They should read it, determine the intent based on the plain language, and apply it. The Supreme Court went off the reservation a long time ago and began just creating laws and regulations out of thin air. They began to write laws as opposed to interpret laws. So we know that's a big deal. Why did he support Sotomayor? Why did he support Kagan? These are two of the most liberal justices on the Supreme Court. Lindsey Graham was right there with them, high-fiving. That's not a Republican principled man. Immigration reform, you ought to use the word amnesty. He was one of the first ones pushing for open border, some sort of, compromise with the Democrats. Remember that?
Yep. He loves amnesty, hence the nickname Lindsey Grahamnesty.
He pushes climate change philosophies. He seeks to compromise with the Democrats whenever he gets the chance. His criticism of Trump has been all over the place. At one minute, he's literally playing golf with him. The next minute, he's criticizing him. Mm-hmm. What does he really believe? Is the answer anything to get elected.
Whatever is politically expedient.
He's over the years, he's shown a propensity to support gun control measures. Mm-hmm. He seems to think we should be involved in every foreign war imaginable. When did that become a conservative principle? Why do we have our kids, men and women, boys and girls, all over the world fighting other people's wars? Did I miss something about that, Lindsay? I know there's some war hawks listening to this right now, and they think that, I guess that makes me a rhino. But when you're a father to two boys, I tell you what, Lindsay, does Lindsey Graham have children? He probably, does he? Does anybody know? I don't think that he does. I am tired of old men in suits sending our kids to war.
Amen.
And I'm tired being a father of two young boys. I can't imagine. Now look. If our liberty is at stake, I get it.
Yeah.
To fight on a foreign soil for someone else, I have a difficult time with that. And it becomes more difficult the older my sons get, because, Lindsay, you should go fight first. Pick up a gun, big guy. If you're so insistent that we're there to protect Syria, you go.
Boom.
You go, but he doesn't. And none of his family will either. I've heard CCR. I know what fortunate son means. Nobody's going to get that.
I got it.
But that's Lindsey Graham. And it frustrates me to no end, because really, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, these old, privileged people sitting on Capitol Hill, more than willing to engage our sons and daughters in wars across the planet while they know their sons and daughters are protected. I have a problem with that.
100%. And we all should have a problem with that, because, again, we have seen too many young American lives lost for battles that I don't see where the American interest is, other than some politician got rich.
Yeah, some money's being made by some fat cat, right?
Yep.
Or some corporation.
Yep. Or a combination of both.
That's going to get me in trouble, too. Don't think for a second that money doesn't control Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
Don't think for a second that oversized corporations and businesses control Washington, D.C. They do, and war is part of that. It's a military-industrial complex. It's been here for an awfully long time. We've been warned about it from people from Eisenhower to Kennedy, and we've ignored it. Yep. And here we are still cowboying up around the world, being the world's police force. Meanwhile, Europe doesn't seem to want to get involved. They want to have us save them every time there's a conflict.
Because they don't have to spend the money. We do.
I guess so. Well, that's Lindsay. That's Lindsay. Healthcare. Remember, John McCain was so insistent on saving Obamacare, and so was Lindsey Graham, remember?
He was.
They worked together. I'm pretty sure Lindsay's first real love was John McCain. He loved him. And look, John McCain, I'm not going to be as critical as some people. He's a war hero.
Yes.
And he went through a lot. Mm-hmm. But when he came back to Arizona, what we really wanted are fighters. We wanted you to be that same fighter.
Yeah. Not the maverick.
Right. And he didn't give us that all the time. And, Obamacare was right there on the cusp. And we couldn't quite get what we needed to. Even Biden administration officials, Lindsey Graham has worked hard to basically vote to confirm every single one of them. And I don't understand the mindset. Pick a side. Pick a side and be consistent. We can still argue about it and debate about it, but I never know where he is. But in fairness, there are people all over the country just like Lindsey Graham. There are people in the state Senate here just like Lindsey Graham. They don't seem to have enough of a backbone to take a position. They're windsocks. Have you ever flown over an airport and you see these things called windsocks, and wherever the wind goes, that's kind of where they fluctuate to?
Yes.
That's Lindsey Graham. It's frustrating. And we don't say this out of a dislike or a hate in our heart for him. We're just trying to motivate him just a little bit.
We hope.
Well, we want him to actually be the conservative I think that South Carolina expects. But, let's go back to that. I think South Carolinians are really good people for the most part. Mm-hmm. But I think also they get caught up in this game. Can Lindsey bring home the bacon, right?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, that happens in multiple states throughout this country, where we ignore their actual record and we just look at, he brought home that money that funded that little park over here. Well,
speaking of money, I don't know if you saw the other day, I'm always really upset about the national debt.
As you should be.
With good reason. The numbers I'm about to give you are mind-boggling. Are you familiar with Harvard University?
A little bit. I think I've heard of Harvard, Chris.
Okay. They received last year $600 million from the federal government. I know it's only $600 million. I mean, just chump change.
Aren't they a private school too?
They're a private school. Their endowment ranges somewhere between $56 billion and $72 billion. Why are taxpayer dollars from anywhere, much less Mississippi, going to fund Harvard? Did I miss the memo?
It's utterly absurd, Chris. I cannot understand why we would send your money, my money, everybody in this room's money to Harvard, a school that already has that much money on its own, yet it's stealing our tax dollars.
Well, maybe here's the answer. Because the reason I transitioned into that was because of Lindsay and because of his ability to bring money back to South Carolina. It seems now we've hired our politicians to be raiders. The idea is to take a pill, an empty pill, and rush to Washington and put as much money in it as you can and bring it back. I'll give you some examples. Say you're the mayor of some small town. I won't use any specific examples because you know who you are. But say you're a mayor of a small town and you're rushing to Washington to ask for $1 million to build a bike track or a splash pad. I mean, in fairness, isn't that the town's responsibility to build?
It should be.
Take a loan, a bond, maybe save some money for a change, but they run to Washington. Now, if everybody's doing that, now you're beginning to understand just how problematic the national debt can be. Now, granted, 70+% of that budget's on entitlements and other welfare expenditures, right? But think about the 30+% that's not. And this is just money that people are rushing up there as quickly as they can, as fast as they can, to grab and bring home to their home states because it gets them reelected. Meanwhile, they run as fiscal conservatives. Meanwhile, the local Republican parties that should be calling this out turn a blind eye because they're benefiting in large part from some of this activity. It's a problem that needs to be corrected. And Lindsey Graham, of course, has been a big part of that, just as John McCain was in Arizona, just as Mitch McConnell has been in Kentucky. And McConnell especially, we talked about him on the last show, he's such an incredibly unpopular politician. Yet, every year, he'll raise 20+ million, he'll go back to Kentucky, he'll talk about the pork he raised, notwithstanding the debt, and they'll reelect him every single time.
It's frustrating.
What are you going to do about it?
You know, I show up and vote against these people, but again, I always get outnumbered because, to your point, there are too many distractions, Chris. So we can't ever learn everybody what they need to learn. I mean, it's not working. I mean, when you got an iPad or you got a phone and there's something more interesting than looking up Lindsey Graham's voting record, that's the problem. 100%.
Well, it's one of the things we talked about last show, and I think you're going to hear it time and time again. And one more thing I want to cover, and we're toward the end of the program now, but you see this right here, right? I don't know if the viewers can see that, but you see who that is.
Yes.
It's a Marjorie Taylor Greene. Love her or hate her, that's who she is, and that's what she's doing. I don't know why she's so popular. I don't get it, but she is. That's fine. That's fine. I actually know her, and I've met her a few times, and she seems okay, I guess. But here's what I don't understand. The Republicans right now are fighting in the U.S. Senate and in the U.S. House. I don't know if you've heard about it. And so you try to get to the bottom of why they're fighting. And I opened up this article, and I began to read it, and there's a blame game. You got the conservatives, and they're saying that these people are all insufficiently conservative, which is accurate. I mean, how many conservatives do you suppose there are in Congress? 35?
That might be generous.
You got 435 people, but 35 could be relatively conservative. And so they have the Freedom Caucus there, and they're doing their best, it seems, to hold the line.
Yeah.
They're not very, very successful because it seems their leadership always sides with the Democrats and always leaves them out for the most part.
Yep.
But here they are doing the best they can to hold the line. So they say the other members are insufficiently conservative. And there's a war happening right now. Do you know what the moderates are saying about the Freedom Caucus and about the conservatives? They're saying they're obstructionist.
That's what they always do in this.
Well, I want y'all to consider what that means. It's a Republican politician claiming they're obstructionist. An obstructionist, by definition, is someone who believes that government doesn't have all the answers. What the Republican politician is saying when he uses that term is he wants to grow government. He wants to use government to his advantage, and they're stopping him from doing so. Their very definition of a rhino. Whenever I hear a Republican talk about obstructionism, I'm hoping they do obstruct. I would love to see all this spending obstructed. I would love to see some of these wars obstructed. I would love to see the border obstructed, right? So I typically favor some obstruction when it's necessary to maintain Republican principles. What these Republicans are saying is they don't worry about Republican principles. They want to hold power. They want to compromise. They want to keep moving the government toward the left. And we used those numbers last week during the show to show you just how far this government has merged to the left. Just remember this, going full circle and wrapping this show up. If you have a philosophy you're combating, like liberalism, which is persistent and ferocious, and they never are satisfied because every time they gain, they redefine and keep pushing. Every time you compromise with that style of philosophy, what do you get if not more liberalism? You see, we're taught as kids that compromise is this positive thing, but folks, we're not talking about toys in a playground here. I teach my sons to share the football. I teach my sons to share the baseball. We're talking about fundamental American principles, and every time one of these Republicans reaches across the aisle to a philosophy that is constantly moving to the left, where does that Republican have to move, if not the left? When was the last time they reached across to the right? When was the last time they chased us to some pro-individual liberty, less government solution? And the answer is, I have no idea. And that's part of the problem. And hopefully, over the years or over the months or after this show, this will probably be the last show. I was going to say this might be something we could address. But this is probably the last one. But if it is, we fought as hard as we could, and we said the truth despite people finding it objectionable. Hopefully, it lights a fire. Hopefully, it starts a conversation. Hopefully, we'll all start pointing at each other and begin discussing these issues and not being afraid of it, because the truth is out there somewhere. And it's not necessarily a Republican truth, and it's not necessarily a Democrat truth. It's the truth, and it's the American truth, and that's what we're fighting to preserve. What do we want to conserve in this country? The American experiment. Individual liberty, dignity for every individual, equal protection under the law, the idea that government cannot and should never discriminate under any circumstances, and we want to be free. To sum it all up, we want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. Let us raise our families. Let us live our lives. Let us keep our money. You do that, you'll have peace in your time. Otherwise, we're going to have to push back. Nobody wants to see that. This is Chris McDaniel's America. Jack, as always, thank you for being here. The Midnight Ride Network, and we're having a great time. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.